WFLA Now, this is Hey JB. Here's JB Biunno.
The most I want to say is that there was an offer to assist Brian with some things in that letter.
Those are the words from the lawyer of Gabby Petito's family, pointing to new evidence the FBI collected, a letter delivered to Brian Laundrie from his mother, Roberta, in which he was allegedly offered some help of some kind regarding Gabby Petito. That's the claim from that side, plus a reevaluation of Brian Laundrie's words. Are they the real story? We're live here on WFLA Now to break it down, and joining us here remotely on Zoom is Brian Entin of NewsNation. Brian, Friday, of course, being a day where so much came out, a good chance for you and I to sit down, go over all of it, go over all the latest. First and foremost, welcome to WFLA Now. Once again, good to have you back on the program. And now that you've had an opportunity, hopefully a good night's sleep to process all of this, what's something that's really sticking out to you in the aftermath of the 8 pages of Brian Laundrie's confession being released, and also now a possible second or even third confession and this letter that allegedly exists between Roberta and Brian?
Thanks for having me, JB. Yeah, yesterday was crazy. A lot of surprises that I didn't expect. Obviously, we had a feeling that the notebook was going to come out yesterday because we knew that both sides were going to the FBI to collect the evidence. And there was a feeling that Mr. Bertolino would put it out. But I wasn't expecting it to be so long, 8 pages. I wasn't expecting this whole mercy killing craziness. And the fact that he had the story that Gabby was injured. I didn't know any of that was coming. But the real surprise yesterday was definitely the Petito's attorney, coming out with this new information about another letter, a letter from Roberta to Brian Laundrie, and then also the revelation that there could be 2 more confessions that we don't know about yet, one of which he says is on a digital device. So that was all new information yesterday that truthfully, I didn't see any of that coming.
Me neither. And it was a total surprise as well to our audience. Brian, what do you make of, I've done a couple of different polls across a couple of different platforms. You're very prevalent on social media, as am I. I'm sure you're seeing the same thing. There is a lot, I would say an overwhelming number of people out there that do not believe Brian Laundrie's last words. What do you make of the response from the public? So many people, of course, who have been following you, so many people that have been following the two of us over the course of this, that just don't believe this story to be actually what happened that night in August of last year.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The first time I read it, through the 8 pages, that was my first thought. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. This can't be, especially because, like, in my mind, I was going back to the place where Gabby Petito was killed just because I'd been out there. So I was visualizing it as I was reading the letter, and it just wasn't adding up. The creek there was close to where the van was, maybe a 5-minute walk. Where her body was found, where she was murdered, was maybe a 10-minute walk from the van. It's remote, but it's also right off of this dirt road where there are a ton of campers coming and going. And then right up the dirt road is a pretty major highway. The cell phone service is good there. So this whole theory that there was no one to help, I don't buy it, having been out there. And again, the main reason is because of the proximity to the van, and then also the cell phone service being good. You could have made a call. You could have done something. It doesn't add up to me. You
were there. And of course, I saw the video that you posted again on Twitter, being in that spot. Brian claims in his 8 pages that he did everything, including making a fire and spooning her and trying to stay by the fire to make sure it wouldn't go out. Do you remember any site whatsoever of a spot where a fire might have existed?
I mean, yeah, there probably were. So it's a popular area for people who are camping and exploring. So there were spots with fires. When I was out there, I called Luis, my photographer, yesterday, because we're not in the same city right now at the moment. I was like, let's just go back to that moment, remind me of everything. I want to make sure my recollection was right. We took a lot of time out there because we were trying to find the exact spot where Gabby's body was. And there are a lot of people who have gone out there and put crosses in other spots thinking that it was the spot. So it took us a long time to find the right spot. But but what I remembered was going back from that spot we were parked right where the van was. And again, I was like, Luis, it was like a 5 to 10 minute walk, right? And he's like, yeah, definitely no more than 10 minutes. So, the building a fire and being in the middle of nowhere, it just, granted, we were there in the daylight. I'm sure it's really dark at night. But it's just not that big of an area, honestly, from where the van was to where they were. And that's just what I kept thinking. Like,
not as vast and intimidating as it's been made out to be.
It's not like they went on this hour or 2 hour hike into the middle of nowhere, far from the van. I mean, it was all really right there.
I want to talk to, if you were joining, for the folks on YouTube, you saw this part. I was going off about all the different moments in time where Brian had an opportunity to do the right thing. And in the aftermath of this, choosing to do the wrong thing, even if something tragic had occurred with he and Gabby, all of these moments where he could have done the right thing, including not leaving her body out there, not leaving the body of his fiance out there just to be, he mentioned at the end of his note to be torn apart by animals. How could you want that for the love of your life, your fiance? So he leaves the body out there. He doesn't contact authorities. He deceives law enforcement by sending this text message from Gabby's phone to Gabby's family, in particular to her mom, Nicole Schmidt. All of these chances in the aftermath of this to do the right thing. And at every stage, as we just illustrated on YouTube, all of these moments, he chooses to do what most I would believe would say is the wrong thing. What do you make of the actions and all the chances, Brian, that Laundrie had to do something such as turn himself in or have conversations about the tragic accident that allegedly occurred, and tell that to Gabby's family? All of these chances were just came and went, and he did not do the right thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last night on Banfield, we had a psychotherapist on to kind of dissect the letter. And her take on it was, that he was trying to get away. It seems like he was trying to get away with it in the beginning. I mean, sending the text messages, using the debit card, coming back to Florida, meeting with the family. And it seems like in the letter, he was sort of concocting the story to get some sympathy. Like you said, he had a lot of chances to do the right thing. And it seems like he was trying to deceive people, see if he could get away with it. That's what she was saying. And then when he realized he wasn't going to be able to anymore, it's like, let's concoct this story where, I can try to protect my parents and maybe get some sympathy out of this whole thing. Let's
turn our attention now to what happened afterwards. You and I are processing this 8 pages. I'm sure it took some time, I'm sure, for both of us to really fully process it and try to, piece together where it fits with all the facts that you and I have collected over the course of our reporting on this story. And of course, then it was on WFLA Now yesterday and spoke to you as well, Brian. Pat Riley called us both to discuss the existence of unknown evidence, unknown to you and I, really unknown to the world. We had no idea this evidence existed. Let's talk first about this letter. A letter that we now have really from both sides, that this letter does in fact exist. It's been confirmed to have existed from Bertolino. He acknowledged the existence of it in text messages to me. I believe you as well, Brian. This letter that had an envelope, and it was titled "Burn After You Read This." It is a letter that Riley told you was odd, Brian. He told me that the contents of the letter were extreme. So he told you odd, he told me extreme, but he said that it contains some offer of help from Roberta to Brian concerning Gabby Petito. There's no date on it. Now, I want to make this clear. I sent Stephen Bertolino a text message, and I'm going to read it out here just for transparency. I said, "Hi, Steve. Sorry to bother you on a Saturday. Considering you have released Brian's notebook, would you be able to provide me with the Roberta letter? I know that in your letter yesterday, you mentioned transparency. We would like a copy of that letter if you are willing to provide it." And so we have submitted now our request to get this letter from Stephen Bertolino. The letter is in the possession of the Laundries after, of course, Bertolino and Riley went to the FBI Tampa yesterday to retrieve evidence collected over the course of the FBI's investigation. And also as well, I talked to Pat Riley as well about what happens about now that the Laundries have this letter. What happens now if it's called upon in a court of law? Let's say that this does proceed to a jury trial. The civil lawsuit proceeds to a jury trial. How does that letter emerge in court? And I was told by Riley that they will call on both Bertolino to present it, and that Bertolino gave his word yesterday, apparently at FBI Tampa, that it was not going to be destroyed, lost, or that something wasn't going to happen to it, that the Roberta letter was going to be maintained and it's going to be kept. It's not going to be destroyed, despite the fact that it has the words "burn after you read this" or something to that effect on the envelope. And also, too, that the FBI Tampa has photographs and digital copies of that Roberta letter as well. So even if something were to happen to the physical letter, the digital letter exists and it's in federal possession. So what do you make of this letter from Roberta? Do you think Bertolino is going to release it to you and I, Brian? I mean, I would say that that's relatively unlikely, maybe possible. If he believes in transparency, maybe he does release it.
I mean, he's a bit unpredictable, as you know. So I could see it going either way. If he thinks it's going to come out some other way, maybe he would release it. What I found interesting when I talked to Mr. Riley last night was that he said that Mr. Bertolino, the look on his face when that letter was in evidence was shock, and that he says Mr. Bertolino was not expecting it, which I found to be very, very interesting, that he said Mr. Bertolino looked shocked. And then he also said, I think you said, I think I don't have my notes in front of me and I can't look at my phone because I'm on the Zoom, but he said something about an offer, that it was an offer from Roberta to Brian. And then he told me, and it was like I was trying to pull it out of him because he didn't have the letter in front of him. And he really didn't want to talk that much about it, but like kind of did. So I was like trying really hard. And the most I got out of him was he said something to the effect of, Roberta said, I would bake a cake and put a saw in it.
Right.
If you end up in jail, something like that, which I thought was really weird, which again was interesting because Mr. Bertolino, when he responded to the letter to us, said it was a letter from a long time ago before the trip. But like, why would Roberta be talking about jail if this letter was even before their trip? But then I've seen on Twitter some people saying some of this has to do with possibly movie references. So I don't really know what to make of it. Again, it came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. It's certainly very, very interesting. And I guess if this civil lawsuit moves forward, that could be a way we could see this letter. That could be this could become part of it. I was thinking this morning about the civil lawsuit. And the hearing this week about the motion to dismiss. It's interesting this stuff wasn't in the lawsuit, which makes me think like this is all new. I mean, I'm not even sure did the Petito side fully know about it, because you would think that that's something they would have put in the lawsuit.
And we know that at this stage, I've been told that at this stage with where they are with the lawsuit, that they're not at the presentation of evidence stage, that they're just stating their claims, but
that makes sense. Yeah. So maybe they were kind of saving it. Maybe
we're hearing now what's been in their back pocket, what they've been sitting on for so long. Also, I want to point out as well regarding this odd, extreme, whatever words used to describe it, Roberta letter. When we texted, I think he sent you the same response too, Brian, but when we initially reached out to Bertolino yesterday for comment about the fact that the envelope said on it, "Burn after you read this," which I mean leads us all to believe that the contents of this letter were not meant to be known by anybody other than Brian Laundrie, that Roberta had full intention of this being a one-way message and then it being destroyed upon it being received by her son Brian. The words, or something to the effect of "burn after you read this," being on the cover of the envelope. Bertolino had this to say: "I do know it's a movie, and what she wrote on the cover of a letter to Brian many months before the trip had the title of a movie on there." And so there is a George Clooney, Brad Pitt, John Malkovich, Tilda Swinton movie by the name of Burn After Reading. I don't know. That might be the legal tactic that Bertolino is setting up here, but That was
he certainly came up with it fast. If that was, I mean, you know, and you sent me that screen grab of like the poster from that movie.
Yeah.
Is it an old? I don't know anything about the movie. Is it an old movie? Do you know? Is it?
No, I haven't seen it. Other than I know that people were commenting at me yesterday saying it's a good movie, and now people are saying, oh, go watch it. But I mean, again, we're staying focused on the subject matter here. I have a lot to watch on Netflix, and I am behind on so many different things, people getting me to watch so many various shows. So perhaps I'll add that to the list. But regardless, that is the response from Stephen Bertolino. And then I want to get into the hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyBrian comments here in just a moment. But then the last thing that came out yesterday is Riley making claims of a second, and then to you, Brian, potentially even a third version of a confession that Brian Laundrie left behind. We know of one that is in the form of that is on a digital device. We believe it is something that is perhaps written out on a digital device. And Riley indicated to me that it's not something that fully adds up with the notebook confession, the 8 pages that were released yesterday by Bertolino.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting. Again, it's kind of like when we thought we knew everything or most of everything, now we're learning there's more, which I had heard rumblings of for quite some time, like, oh, just wait till your FOIA comes back, your Freedom of Information Act request from the FBI, which is going to take forever because you know how the federal government is, and it's like a nightmare. So there are these little things now trickling, possibly 2 other confessions. So, you know, again, I think if this,
I think you're breaking up a little bit here, Brian.
Oh,
can you repeat that last point? You were breaking up there a bit. Hopefully we get a better signal.
Sorry, can you hear me, JB?
I think I got you.
I was just saying, I think I might be, am I back?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. No, I was just saying that there's been a lot that's come out that I didn't expect. We had heard rumblings to, you know, be on the lookout. And I was just saying if the civil suit moves forward, I think we're gonna see a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and again, as a reminder, Judge Hunter W. Carroll says he'll release his decision within 2 weeks of this past Wednesday, which gives us about roughly 10 or so days before the decision is released by Judge Carroll. All right, let's open up now. We've got Brian Entin with us for another 10 or so minutes. Let's open it up now to Q&A. I got my eyes, when I'm looking here, folks, my eyes are looking right here. That is us paying attention to the Facebook Live and YouTube Live comment section. Want to now introduce as many hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyBrian comments as possible. And we'll start here. Why don't we start, where's the audience bigger? We've got, I think we've got more people joining us on YouTube, so we will start with YouTube. Let's get to Gypsy's comment. Hashtag HeyJB. My thoughts are it can't be too damning or we would see the mother arrested. Why do you think this letter is so shocking? I bring up Gypsy's comment here to begin with, talking about the Roberta letter, because she makes an excellent point. This was in the FBI's possession. If there was something incriminating with this piece of evidence that would lead them to believe that Roberta Laundrie committed a crime, then of course the FBI is going to proceed with charges. The FBI had this evidence in their possession for months and didn't file criminal charges, and now of course it's being presented potentially in a civil lawsuit. So this is a good point here to bring up, Brian.
Yeah, I agree with Gypsy. I agree with you. I thought the same thing. They had all the evidence, they had the public pressure, and they chose not to press criminal charges with the evidence they had. So I would think that, yeah, they've looked all of this stuff over from a criminal perspective. How it fits into the possible civil suit, we'll see. But yeah, I agree.
I have to recheck the dates, but Beetle says, hashtag HeyJB, what about Brian's trip home in August? Now, let's not forget, Brian did come home to Tampa Bay and then returned back to the cross-country road trip that he was on with his fiance. I was thinking about this, and I'm glad Beetle brought this up, because I was thinking about this on the way home last night too. Is the letter, the Roberta letter, connected to Brian's trip back? Because people were asking, and I don't know if you got this from Pat Brian, but people were asking, if this letter was sent via postal service, or if it was delivered to Brian, or if it was handed to Brian physically. We don't know how this envelope made it from Roberta to Brian. But if there was this return trip home, could that have been an opportunity for this letter to pass from one person to the other? It's worth noting, too, that there's a disagreement on when the letter was written. Bertolino saying that the letter was written many months before the trip. Meanwhile, we've got Pat Riley saying he believes that it occurred after Gabby Petito was killed. So we have this comment here from Beetle about Brian's trip home that people sometimes forget about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know that Mr. Riley told me that the letter was found in the van, because I was confused at first when he started talking about it. Was it with Brian out at the reserve when he was found? No, he said it was in the van, and the FBI got it from the van. So that's sort of the answer to that part of the question. But in terms of how it fits in, was it given to him when he came home on that trip? We don't know, but a lot of people do forget about that trip. Remember, Gabby was staying in the hotels in Salt Lake City, and Brian came back for a short time. So
let's get to this one from Cammie. #HeyJB, #HeyBrian. I think the reason there were no charges is because it's not a crime to offer to cover up a crime. It is a crime when someone actually does help. Lawyer says it was assistance with Gabby. Again, a good point. And it's got to be incriminating evidence for there to be a crime against Roberta Laundrie. It's one of the themes that has been ever present for months now, Brian, is this the public vilifying Chris and Roberta Laundrie, and people wanting there to be some accountability for the actions, or really their inactions, in the aftermath of Gabby Petito's death and Brian Laundrie returning home. That's really the basis of the civil lawsuit that was filed. So many people just want to hear from the Laundries. So many people want to know why they didn't do more, including, of course, perhaps no one more than Nicole Schmidt, Joe Petito, and the entire Petito and Schmidt families.
Yeah, I think the question is, from a criminal perspective, the burden of proof to say there was a crime, did they sort of walk right up to the line and, not technically commit a crime? And, I asked Mr. Bertolino earlier this week when we had him on Banfield, a lot of people say, think what you want about Mr. Bertolino, but a lot of people said, while you might not like him, was he a really good lawyer for them, in the sense that he has sort of protected them up until this point from facing any criminal charges? Whatever he's telling them not to talk, telling them behind the scenes, how to handle this and to just stay totally silent. He perhaps did a good job, legally speaking. But when you start thinking about ethics, I think most people can agree. I mean, what I always go back to in my mind with this story, that with the parents, that I always go back to this when I'm thinking about this. The fact that the Laundries were close to Gabby Petito, thought of her like a daughter, that they were engaged, that she lived in their house for so long. I do not understand how you would ignore the Petitos during that time. I get that it is a mother and a father's nature to protect their son, but you loved Gabby. She lived in your house. I cannot understand how you could just stay silent that long, how you wouldn't wake up in the middle of the night after 2 weeks and say, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. And call Nicole Schmidt or call the FBI or whatever, obviously Mr. Bertolino was there in the background telling them not to do it, but it's just hard to imagine.
And let's not forget that Bertolino was giving legal advice, of course, to Brian, that he had conversations with Brian upon his return home to the Tampa Bay area, to Northport, Florida. There's also...
Yeah, and I don't know if you... Sorry to interrupt you, baby. I don't know if you saw during the interview with Bertolino earlier this week, he said, and this is like the second time he said it to me, maybe one day I'll tell you what Brian's side of the story is. Maybe one, so just going back to these conversations that they had, Bertolino knows a lot.
But is it the truth? That's the part that I think, and Brian, I think that everyone is thinking, right, is that what credibility does Brian Laundrie have at this point? If Brian Laundrie comes home and tells his parents a story and tells his lawyer a story, I mean, how do we know that that isn't just something that he told them, an altered version of reality, an altered version of the truth?
Yeah. That
they, right? So Brian Laundrie's credibility, it has been called into question here, and of course it has been called into question here. But I was mentioned earlier, I ran a poll on my Instagram, on my JB Instagram, and 95% of people don't believe the story that is left behind in these 8 pages. And it's easy to understand why there's so many skeptics out there. It really is.
Well, and was there a meeting when Brian Laundrie came back without Gabby, when they got Mr. Bertolino involved? Were there meetings and phone conversations where this entire thing was a concocted plan? This is how we're going to explain it. This is how we're going to write the letter. This is how this is going to play out. I don't know the answer to that question, but what was going on behind the scenes? I mean, it was almost interesting. And this is something Mr. Riley brought up to me. He kept, why did Mr. Bertolino release the letter yesterday so immediately? Right. He said, in the interest of transparency, look, I'm not going to complain as a reporter. I want to get as much as I can. I'm not going to, send me everything, Mr. Bertolino. And I'll be respectful and do it in a fair way. So I'm not saying I'm happy he did release it, but from a perspective of looking at why, from almost a public relations, I mean, it was almost like, was it planned that when they got it, they were going to release it right away and hope that this sort of narrative took over? I don't know. It's all very interesting.
I thought of the same thing, and I tried. I tried to put on my lawyer hat a little bit and put myself in Bertolino's frame of mind, or Chris and Roberta's frame of mind. Did they think that this was going to exonerate Brian or alleviate some of the pressure on their family by giving them Brian's take of it? Because, again, as we illustrated on the YouTube stream before we jumped on live here on Facebook Live, we talked about all the opportunities that Brian, despite what happened, whether it was an accident, an accidental death of Gabby, or an intentional death. Listen. Brian intentionally killed Gabby. He indicated that. But whether or not it was the aftermath of an accident, or whether or not the entire thing was an intentional act of evil, regardless of how you feel about it, the aftermath and the events that occurred afterwards, Brian had so many opportunities to do the right thing, and he didn't. And he kept doing the wrong thing over and over and over and over and over again until his final moments. And so there's just, I can't wrap my brain around trying to figure out exactly how this fits in to the strategy that Bertolino and the Laundries have as far as going forward. Perhaps it was in the
and I think there is a strategy. I do. I mean,
me too. Is the strategy?
Bertolino, he's a smart guy. I think there's a strategy. This all fits in somehow. Or maybe they just knew that people would forever talk about this notebook, and there'd be conspiracy theories, and maybe they just thought, let's just get it over with and put it out there
and rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak. Or perhaps was this intended for one person? Was it intended for Judge Carroll to look at this and say, okay, the notebook's out there, the public interest in this is going to die down, and perhaps there isn't as much? Because we had on Peter Tragos, who's a great attorney here in the Tampa Bay area. We had him on for a stream earlier this week, and he indicated that, listen, that the public fascination with this case, there is no doubt, is going to have some form of an impact on the pretrial hearing, and as well as should this proceed to trial. So there is that public arena component to it. Was this put out there to perhaps influence Judge Carroll's decision, or is Judge Carroll?
But I almost think, in my mind, it almost influences him in the opposite way.
That's
because
what people
hopefully it doesn't influence him, because they're not supposed to be influenced, and it's supposed to just be what's in the lawsuit. And but if he is watching all of these developments, it's now back, at the forefront of the news. People are interested again. There's new questions. I would think that it would be helping the Petitos in a way, from that perspective. From the legal civil perspective.
There's a lot of people that agree with you, and a lot of people saying that now the notebook is out, it almost re-inflamed people and got them more, once again, reinvigorated regarding this story, because they want to know, again, why Brian chose the actions that he did in the aftermath of Gabby's death, and why there wasn't more of a ethical decision process that was laid out by his parents, by Chris and Roberta Laundrie. Also, as well, I can't not bring this up. I can't avoid it anymore. The amount of comments that I get from people, Brian, and how my inbox has been blowing up from people saying that they're not so sure that these are Brian's last words, that this is not, people want a handwriting analysis of this. The FBI has indicated that this is in fact the final 8 pages. Of course, they have indicated as much, and we have this now in as we understand it, this final word, this final message to the world from Brian. But there are still people who want there to be a handwriting analysis of Brian Laundrie's notebook. What do you make of all those comments that are coming in as well?
Yeah, I mean, the FBI seems confident that this was his, confession and suicide letter. Anything's possible. I actually was thinking, I'm filling in again next week for Banfield. I was thinking, would it be interesting to have a handwriting expert on one night? So that sort of crossed my mind too. And all the parts that he crossed out, and it would be interesting to sort of dissect that angle of it. But I think there'll always be, look, we're not going to get all the answers because he's dead. So I think there'll always be these sort of questions that we wonder about. And that is, I get it.
Not to mention the endless conspiracies that people out there still believe that Brian is alive, which, to use a Bertolino word, if everyone will allow me to do so, I will say is hogwash as far as all the conspiracy theories that exist out there. Brian, I believe that you would second that, correct?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. All right, let's get to we're going to pivot now for a quick second here, everybody. Let me explain where this stream is going to go. The news portion of this stream is going to continue in a second. Okay, we're going to be ending our stream here on Facebook Live. To our Facebook Live audience, what I would invite you to do is come join us over on YouTube, where we're more equipped for longer streams. We can, of course, stay with you live on Facebook, but with the news of the day, it's just more important for us to stay with you live on YouTube, and we're going to be ending our Facebook Live stream. Please go check my WFLA JB Twitter if you would like to continue watching this live stream, and join us on YouTube. To our YouTube audience, don't go anywhere. To our WFLA.com, WFLA app audience, please don't go anywhere. And for those of you on Facebook Live, please click on the link in the description on this video for the very latest on Brian Laundrie, the notebook confession, the full transcript if you want to read the words and you can't make out, of course, the words as it is in Brian Laundrie's handwriting. You want to read the words for yourself. Click on the link in the description on this video. This is going to end the Facebook stream, but stick around for just another few seconds. Brian, Entin, don't go anywhere. I have one more thing for you. We're going to quickly come back here to YouTube in just a moment here on WFLA Now.